Broncos country, welcome back to another video here on the ParkerLovesSports YouTube channel. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to spend them here with me. And in today's video, we're going to be going over the Denver Broncos practice squad. Now, for the practice squad, you are allowed to carry 16 players. However, the Broncos get an exception. Well, every team gets an exception, but the Broncos have an exception because they currently have 16 players on the roster, but they're allowed to sign one more because they do have an international signing we'll talk about here in a little bit. If you do enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as the support is greatly appreciated. I'm hopefully wanting to do this as a career one day, so by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel helps me out a lot. And before we jump into the video, as always, I do want to remind you that Jesus loves you and that he died and sacrificed himself on the cross for your sins, and he rose from the dead 3 days later. And because of his death and resurrection, that is how we are saved. It's not through how many times we read the Bible or go to church or do these good deeds. While those things are good and we should want to do those things, the sole thing that saves us is our faith in Jesus, that he died on the cross for our sins. And if you truly believe that, then you'll go to heaven. It's that simple. It's that easy. It's an important message that I like to share before every single one of my videos. And I don't care if you don't like it. I'm sorry. I'm going to continue to share it before every single one of my videos. And with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump straight in to the Denver Broncos practice squad. So, starting off, we have probably my favorite signing that we made, and that is picking up Donald Parham Jr. Now, Parham was with the Los Angeles Chargers for the past, I think it was 4 years, and we've obviously had to play against him, and he is honestly he's a solid tight end in my opinion. Maybe he's not the craziest tight end. He doesn't have the best production, but he's 6'8", 237 pounds, and he is I wouldn't say a vertical threat. He's not like Greg Dulcich where he's going to run the super fast 40 and get down the field, but he can be a receiving threat. He's going to be super tall. He's going to be super hard to defend at 6'8". So I love this pickup for the Broncos. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets promoted to the active roster. You know, I know a lot of Broncos fans like Lucas Krull. I could see if Krull struggles at this beginning of the year, that Parham could get called up in his place, or we'll have to see what happens with Nate Adkins, because I do believe he is going to be our fullback this season, even though we signed Michael Burton, who I think we'll talk about next, if not next, very, very soon. But yeah, Parham is a tight end out of Stetson. He's 27 years old. He has 4 years of NFL experience. I'm just doing NFL experience. I'm not going to include, the UFL, the AAF, all those other leagues that have come up. We're just going to talk about NFL experience. Parham has 4 years of NFL experience, and in my opinion, I absolutely love this pickup for the Denver Broncos. Next up, we have Lil'Jordan Humphrey, who I don't think this is any surprise. I feel like a lot of Broncos fans expected Lil'Jordan Humphrey to either make the active roster or make the practice squad. And so I'm not surprised. I believe there was a tweet. I can't remember exactly what it says, but Lil'Jordan Humphrey is excited to be back with Coach Sean Payton and with the Broncos. I do expect him to be elevated from the practice squad if need be. Of course, we only have 5 wide receivers on the active roster. So if we need to elevate a practice squad member, which you can elevate a practice squad member 3 times during the season, and the next time if you want to bring him up, you have to sign him off the practice squad and put him on the active 53-man roster. And I expect Lil'Jordan Humphrey to get called up if need be. He's a wide receiver out of the University of Texas. He's 26 years old. He's 6'4", 225 pounds, and he has 5 years in the NFL in terms of experience. I think, well, obviously last year he was with the Broncos, and before that he was with both the Saints and the Patriots. Next up, we have Michael Burton, and I'll be honest, when I first saw that Michael Burton got cut, I was kind of shocked. I was like, wow, this is surprising to me because I know that Michael Burton's obviously been with Sean Payton before in New Orleans, and I really expected him to make the roster because we utilized him a decent amount last year. Mostly he was that lead blocker for our running backs, but we also had some fullback dives. He also went out on some pass patterns and he caught some passes. So it was a little bit of a shock to me that they cut Michael Burton, but to me that indicates that the Broncos kind of like Nate Adkins, because again, I'm kind of feeling like he's going to play in that fullback role. Of course, the fullback is a dying position in the NFL nowadays, but I was still shocked to see Michael Burton get cut because he is a veteran. He's a solid player. He is 32 years old, so he is getting older. He's 6 feet tall, 247 pounds, has 9 years of experience. Of course, last year he was with the Broncos. Before that, I know he's been with the Chiefs and the Saints, and I think his rookie year, he was with the Commanders, but I don't know if that was in preseason, and then Sean Payton signed him to the roster afterwards. But Michael Burton was a surprise cut to me, so I'm happy that he is on the practice squad. Next up, we have cornerback Reese Taylor out of Purdue. He's 25 years old, a little bit on the smaller side for an NFL player at 5'9". He's 188 pounds, so he's kind of smaller and lighter. Has 1 year of experience. I believe he was signed by the Kansas City Chiefs as an undrafted free agent last year. Then, obviously, he was on the roster this year. I think we signed him to a futures contract. And he made the practice squad, which is solid. I know he had a very solid camp, and I know there were some people saying that Reese Taylor could make a actual active roster spot on the 53. I could have, when I was doing my prediction, I just couldn't find a way to fit Reese Taylor onto the active 53-man roster. But honestly, I don't mind him being on the practice squad, as he did have a solid camp. He had a solid preseason, so Reese Taylor is on the practice squad. Next up is offensive lineman Will Sherman. Now, I put offensive lineman here because he is an offensive tackle, but for offensive line, I feel like you could move him to guard if need be as well. Sorry for hitting the microphone. He went to the University of Colorado. He's 25 years old at 6'4", 300 pounds. Now, he does only have 1 year of NFL experience. He was a 6th round draft pick by the New England Patriots, and I believe after that season he was cut or moved on from because he didn't play in 22 or 23, I believe. I don't know the exact facts, but was on the roster, obviously got cut, re-signed to the practice squad, which, I'm a little bit worried about our offensive line depth. In the preseason games, they did not look that amazing, but it is important to still have offensive linemen on your practice squad. If anything happens, you can elevate them. You can call them up if need be, just to have that depth. And offensive line depth is important to have even on the practice squad. Next up, we have Thomas Yasmin. And one sec, let me do that. I felt like my desk was falling apart. But Thomas Yasmin, this is our international spot. So he doesn't take up one of the spots on the 16-man practice squad because he is from Australia. So he is a tight end out of Utah, 23 years old, 6'5", 251 pounds. He was an undrafted free agent rookie that we signed. And honestly, because he is from Australia, why not utilize that extra spot that you get for him being an international player? So he doesn't take up one of the 16 spots, as I said. So we can still have 16 players plus Yasmin for a total of 17 players on the practice squad. And honestly, I see Yasmin more as a developmental tight end. I don't know if he'll see the roster this year, but I do think he could be a solid developmental tight end just to see what you have in Thomas Yasmin. Next up, we got Jordan Miller, who's a defensive lineman. He was out of SMU. He's 24 years old, 6'3", 307 pounds. He was a rookie, undrafted free agent out of SMU. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Jordan Miller. I really didn't see a whole lot of him in the preseason games. Now, granted, I was live at 2 of them, so I wasn't really able to see who subbed in from my seat, just because I got the side angle. I guess it's kind of like the camera angle, but I'll be honest, I haven't heard a whole lot of Jordan Miller from the offseason, but the Broncos obviously like him, so they're keeping him on the roster for obviously the practice squad. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Next up, we have Dondrea Tillman. He's a defensive lineman, edge rusher, can play both. He's out of the University of, It's the University of Indiana at Pennsylvania, which I'll be honest, I've never heard. But yeah, he was signed to actually a 3-year deal from the UFL. I believe he was like the top or one of the top free agents from the UFL. And with the 3-year deal, I was like, wow, okay, so Dondrea Tillman's going to make the active roster. Alas, he did not make it. 26 years old, 6'3", 207 pounds. Has 1 year of NFL experience, but of course, played in the UFL as well, so he does have that experience. But it was kind of a crowded room at both the defensive line and the edge rusher positions. So he makes it back to the practice squad, which I like. I really thought he was going to make the active roster. But back on the practice squad, solid. It's fine as long as he doesn't get obviously signed by another team. He'll be on the practice squad for the Denver Broncos. Now, I do want to mention something that I forgot to mention at the very top of the video, at the very beginning of the video. The Broncos still have one practice squad spot remaining, with Yassin being the international free agent. So there is one more spot that will be signed, and by the time this video is out, maybe it's already happened, and so I'll probably put it at the start of my next video. But just be aware that I'm recording this in the very early hours of Thursday, August 29th. So if a signing has happened for that final practice squad spot, I don't know about it yet. Then we got David Sills. David Sills is such a cool story. I'm glad he's on the practice squad. If you don't know David Sills' story, go look it up on YouTube. There are some fantastic YouTube videos on David Sills and his story and his journey. Very, very cool. He's a wide receiver out of West Virginia. He's 28 years old at 6'3", 211 pounds. 3 years of NFL experience with the New York Giants, and he has some from last year with, of course, us. He played in the final few games with the Broncos. Honestly, David Sills is a solid depth receiver. I think, honestly, he had a chance to make the roster. It's just our wide receiver depth was massive. Of course, you had the gimmies. You had Cortland Sutton, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Mims. You knew Troy Franklin was going to make it. You had a feeling that Devon Vele was going to make it. Honestly, though, if there was going to be a sixth, you probably would have kept Tim Patrick, Brandon Johnson, Lil'Jordan Humphrey, Jalen Virgil, and David Sills would also all have been fighting for its seventh spot. So just with the depth, didn't make it. But I am glad that David Sills is back on the practice squad. Some guys who are not coming back, if you guys missed the news, is Brandon Johnson. He's not coming back. He's going to the Pittsburgh Steelers practice squad. And Jalen Virgil, I can't remember which ones he's going between. I think one of them is the Commanders, though. He's not coming back to the Broncos practice squad because he thinks he has a better chance to crack the active roster somewhere else, which, fair play to him. I wish him all the best of luck as long as they don't sign with a division rival. Of course, unless that's their only option to stay in the NFL is to sign with a division rival, then go ahead, keep your NFL dreams alive. But other than that, don't sign with the division rival. But Sills, cool story. Like that we have him on the practice squad, and I could see him getting called up for a couple games maybe towards the end of the year, or if we need some depth, if there's an injury that's going to happen. I do think that David Sills is a solid depth option for the Broncos at receiver. Next up, we got Nick Gargiulo, the offensive lineman, a.k.a. he's a center guard hybrid. He can, well, I guess not hybrid, but he can play both center and guard. He was our 7th round pick, the second to last pick in the draft out of South Carolina, 24 years old at 6'5", 301 pounds. And Gargiulo never blew me away when we first drafted him. I didn't know who he was when we drafted him, and then I wasn't super impressed. I kind of had a feeling he wasn't going to make the roster. I don't think I had him in either of my roster prediction videos. Definitely not my first one, which was the way too early one. Can't remember my most recent one, my most recent predictive NFL roster, if I had him making it. But nonetheless, he's back on the practice squad, and honestly, he can be a guy who you can develop. But in terms of the roster, how we have it right now, I like Luke Wattenberg over Gargiulo, and I liked Alex Forsythe over Gargiulo. So it is tough, but maybe he can develop and surprise me for next season. Maybe he gets called up and surprises me. But looked okay in the preseason. I didn't think he was outstanding. I didn't think he was horrible. Next up, we got Quentin Newsome, another undrafted free agent rookie for the Broncos, the cornerback out of Nebraska. He's 6'1", 185 pounds. He's 23 years old, and he had a solid preseason. I know there was some buzz about him potentially making the roster. Just with the cornerback room, though, I didn't see it happening. But he is back on the practice squad, and someone who I do think that the Broncos can develop. Of course, there was the 2 Nebraska undrafted free agents who we signed in Quentin Newsome and Omar Brown, I believe it was. But yeah, to me, when you're looking at the corners and how you compare them, I don't know. I can't see him beating. I couldn't see him beating out any of the other guys, but I'm glad he's back on the practice squad. And as I keep saying, for all these guys, a very, I guess not a very solid, but someone who could potentially develop. And it's always worth taking some shots on these undrafted free agent rookies. They're young, they got some upside, and if you hit and you develop one, perfect. I mean, you look at Jaquan McMillan, who 2 years ago was an undrafted free agent out of, what was it? It was Eastern Carolina, ECU. And he's become our starting slot corner, and he looks to be a very, very solid corner in the NFL potentially. So you never know. Quentin Newsom, could that happen? It's very unlikely, but you never know. He could surprise a lot of people. Then next up is Tyler Beatty, who I really thought after his second and third week of preseason games, I thought his performance, he would have made the active roster. He looked very, very solid, and quite frankly, I'm a big fan of Blake Watson. That's who I predicted to make the That's who I predicted us to make the roster in both my way too early prediction and my final prediction video. And then the third preseason game was played, and I was like, okay, yeah, Tyler Beatty's probably going to make the roster as that fourth running back. Kind of had a feeling P. Ryan was going to get cut. And it's like, okay, you got to choose between Beatty and Blake Watson. And so after that third preseason week, I thought Beatty was going to make it. He gets cut, and I think we're so lucky that no other team picked Beatty up off of, I think it was waivers, right? He had to clear waivers. I can't remember if he had to clear waivers or if he could just sign right away. I know there's a difference between veterans and rookies. I don't know if he's at that veteran status yet, but he's got that 1 year of experience, so I think he had to clear waivers at 5'8", 197 pounds. He's 24 years old, out of the University of Missouri. He was a 6th-round pick by the Baltimore Ravens in 2022. And he's looked solid. So I'm surprised he made it through waivers, and then we got him back on the practice squad. So I think this is an excellent signing, bringing Beatty back. I think he can be a very solid NFL player with what he's shown so far. And so, yeah, welcome back to the I'm going to say welcome back to the squad. The practice squad is still a part of the team. You know, even if you're not on the active 53-man roster, welcome back to the Broncos, Tyler Beatty. Next up, we have Tanner McAllister, the safety. And you'll notice I put two colleges here, Ohio State and Oklahoma State. It is because I'm an Oklahoma State alum. I have to show some love for some former Cowboys. Technically, he's from Ohio State because that was where he played his final season of college football. But I'm going to throw Oklahoma State up there. He's 23 years old, 5'11", 191 pounds, has 1 year of experience. I believe that was last year with the Cleveland Browns. And, you know, I'm happy to have McAllister. He made some plays. He got his name called. Obviously, made a couple of tackles. I don't know if he made any huge impact plays, but he looked solid at the preseason games that I went to, and obviously that we saw against the Colts in all three games, against the Colts, the Packers, and the Cardinals. To me, because I was at the game, so I think I might be a little bit biased and tilted in that direction, he looked pretty solid against the Packers and the Cardinals, both of the live games I went to. But yeah, I think he's a solid player to have on the practice squad, and it's another, like I keep saying, and I'm going to keep saying it over and over, another guy who can be a developmental piece for the future. You know, he was an undrafted free agent. If he hits, he hits, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. But it's always worth keeping these guys on the practice squad. Then up next, we got Matt Henningsen, the defensive lineman from Wisconsin. He was our 6th-round pick in 2022 during that, what was it? It was during the Nathaniel Hackett draft, which, you know, that draft, it is what it is. You got a couple of hits in Benito and hopefully in Dulcich if he can stay healthy. Henningsen, honestly, he was a solid depth player. He filled in for Iomo Wazarike, who got suspended, who was, funny enough, also from that draft. And he was solid, but with the defensive line depth that we added this offseason, it was going to be an uphill battle for him to make it. I honestly thought he would make it, but he does get released, and he is coming back to the Denver Broncos, which I don't hate. I really like Matt Henningsen, and I still like his upside that he has. Even if a lot of people have given up on him, I think that I still like Matt Henningsen. We'll see what he can do. He's 25 years old, 6'3", 291 pounds, and of course, he has 3 years of NFL experience in 22, 23, and then I guess technically this is his 3rd year. Then, moving on, we got Michael Bandy, the wide receiver out of San Diego. He was an undrafted free agent and actually signed with the Chargers. The Chargers had him for a season or two, and then cut him, released him. I don't know what happened over there, but then he signs with the Broncos. He actually was on the roster last season. I think maybe he was on the practice squad last season. I can't remember exactly, but he's back, and he is on the smaller side at 5'10", 190 pounds. He's 26 years old with 3 years of NFL experience, but for Bandy, he's mostly going to be a returner for you. He is going to be the kick returner, the punt returner. He's got a lot of speed, but he's shorter in stature, and he almost had a touchdown grab against the Cardinals, but he couldn't haul it in. And even if he did, it was going to be close whether he got a body part in bounds or got both feet in bounds. It's tough. It was a tough catch in the corner, but he does end up dropping it. And I like what Bandy can bring. I like the upside. I think Mims is still our returner. And then if we had to go to a backup, it would probably be Tremon Smith or Riley Moss. But having Michael Bandy as a depth potential returner with a lot of speed, I don't hate having that on your practice squad. Next up, though, and I think this is the final player, actually, it's Calvin Throckmorton, the offensive lineman, who was an undrafted free agent out of the University of Oregon. I believe the Saints signed him, and then before he signed with the Broncos, so last year, or his previous team, I guess, with the Broncos, I don't know if it was last year, was with the Carolina Panthers. He's 28 years old at 6'5", 311 pounds with 4 years of NFL experience. And I remember it was 2020, that 2020 draft. It was one of my first mock drafts I ever did. I had the Broncos taking Calvin Throckmorton in the 3rd round. And I think this was a couple months before the draft still. Throckmorton ended up falling down the rankings, went undrafted. But he's on the Broncos squad. I guess, I was going to say he's on the Broncos, but he's on the practice squad now. And he's a guy who can play center. He can play guard. Heck, you could even kick him out to tackle if you need him to. So he's kind of the Swiss Army knife of an offensive lineman for the Broncos. And, is he the greatest? No, but again, like I mentioned earlier, it's important to have depth on your practice squad. If the worst case scenarios happen and the backups go down, or the starters, backups go down on the active roster, you can elevate people from the practice squad that are familiar with your system. So it's very important to have all sorts of depth on your practice squad. The Broncos, we have a lot of offensive linemen on the practice squad. It's Throckmorton, it's Gargiulo, it's Will Sherman, and I might be missing one that I forgot about. But yeah, this is the Denver Broncos practice squad. There is still one more player who can still be signed and added to the roster. We'll see. Will that happen soon? I don't know. We'll have to see. But if you did enjoy this video, do make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as the support is greatly appreciated. Thank you all so much for watching, and my name is Parker, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.